Hey, and welcome back to Gaming for Tokens. I'm Marshall, and in this episode we're going to be picking up right where we left off with the different particle effects and what you can do with them. In this episode we're going to be talking a little bit about the particle shaders and effects, or particle shaders and textures rather. We're going to go into a little bit of lighting and how I set up a script to handle lighting flicker and things for fire. Might go into a little bit of explosions and things if we have time. Speaking of time, I want to keep this video a little shorter than the last one, so this might be a two-parter where I talk about textures and shaders and things in this episode, and then the next one I talk about the explosion effect sequencer and stuff that I've built. As a matter of fact, that's probably going to be the case. But yeah, let's jump right in. In the last episode, I showed you this little flaming cube setup that I had going on. I briefly mentioned what was going on there. Didn't go into depth. This episode is going to be all about that depth. I do want to address that, like, my background changed for some reason, and I don't know why because I didn't change it. So that's fun. We can change it back, but I don't. It's not a big deal. I don't care. So yeah, what we have going on here is we have a rotated cube. We have a flame animation, and we have smoke. So I'm going to start with the more basic stuff and go more advanced. The basic one that we're going to be looking at is going to be the smoke particle effect, because that's pretty much what you guys watched last time, which was it's just a particle effect. It's pretty simple. It emits over time, and it loops. So it's not going to be like a burst or anything like that. I just want a constant smoke to be happening. It's emitting from a cone, so nothing fancy there. It's kind of a narrow cone because I want it to be constrained within this area, because it kind of blooms out in a funnel shape, like cones, or like a smoke cloud would, I guess. As a color over lifetime, that is a gradient that looks like so. So it fades in, and the reason why we want to fade in is because we're going to have a flame there, and it looks really weird when the smoke is coming from the same source as the flame, which is strange. If you ever watch how fire looks, at least, the smoke actually comes from the end of the flame, not the root of the flame, which is a thing to know, I guess. So we kind of want a little bit of a gap down here on the bottom for the flame to exist in. So that's kind of why I've chosen to leave it empty there. And I could intensify that by doing something like this. And now I actually have a gap there. And I can extend this out a little. And now I'll start with a bigger gap. The problem is, because of our random lifetimes and things, you'll notice that every now and then I have like a weird smoke puff that starts down here. And then this is bad looking up here in those situations. So I chose not to do it that way. So I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. Just because it kind of provides a smooth gradient on the way up. That's all. All right, moving on. We have a size over lifetime, which looks kind of like this, where we start off small, we get large because the smoke particles are dispersing into the air, which is also why we have a gradient fade off in the end. That's how smoke works. And what else? We have a rotation over lifetime, which is just going to be, it's an angular velocity again, so negative 30 to positive 30. I don't want it to move too quickly, and as a matter of fact, this might even be too fast, so I might change it to negative 10 to positive 10, so that it looks more like the smoke is just dispersing into the air again, right? You only want a little bit of movement there, you don't want a whole lot, but you also don't want the same texture to be repeated over the smoke. So that's why we have a start rotation up here set to 0 and 360. So it's going to choose I might actually just do 180. So it's going to choose an initial rotation to be at so that it doesn't look like the texture is repeating so much. I don't know, maybe 360 is a good idea. I don't know. It doesn't really, it's whatever. But the starting color is also, I dropped down the alpha on this because if you bring it up, it looks like it's like super thick black smoke. It's not really what I'm going for, because this isn't like a garbage fire or anything. This is just like I'm almost going for like a candle flame. So I kind of want this to be like a little less present, I guess. I want it to be kind of like a periphery smoke. And then, what else? In the renderer, I have a custom shader or a custom material hooked up. Well, it's not a custom shader, it's just a custom material with a texture. So yeah, otherwise this is pretty much everything from the last video. I quickly hooked this up and it looks kind of like smoke. It's good enough for what I want to do here. And the material that I have set up here is the fire particle smoke, which looks like this. It might look better if I put it on a plane. Give me a plane, please. It's not going to give me a plane, is it? Oh, it's not going to give me a plane. Oh, that sucks. Well, yeah, it looks like that kind of. So the idea with this shader is the shader that I chose is a particles multiply, and that's located under effects. No, it's not. Sorry, particles multiply. There's also particles multiply double, which is effectively going to do the same thing for us, kind of, except it'll be a little darker. But I'm not really going for a dark particle anyway. So yeah, just to quickly go over all of these different things. So under the shaders dropdown, which I did a video previously on this whole like shader workflow thing and how to do shader swapping and stuff like that, set up materials and things. So go watch that if this is super unfamiliar to you, because that will help out a lot. But yeah, under the shader dropdown, under where was I? Particles. There's a series of different effects down here. Now additive is going to take brights and make them glom together with brights. I believe that is the default for particles. I could be mistaken. Let's take a look. So we're going to create a particle system, and your shader is going to be it's going to be alpha blended. Particles alpha blended something. Okay, so if we were to look back at our smoke, particles alpha blended PreMultiply is the one that it's using. You'll notice that makes it a lot brighter. It's, from what I understand, well, okay, it makes the particle show up less here because it's pulling from the brights a lot more. That's not what we want for this, but basically additive is going to take the brights and glom them together with the brights. Additive soft is going to do that in kind of a different way with alpha. So you'll notice that the particles additive has a tint color, a particle texture, and so I'm going to change this to be a different particle texture so we can see it better, like this. So it's going to behave like this, where it's going to take the brights and add them with the brights behind it. And then we can tint it like red if we want, right? And it has an alpha slider of its own, right? So this is probably a good example of what it is. So like as the brights layer on top of each other, they kind of glom together into a bright mass. This is really great for steam and for white smoke. Like if we wanted to go with a white smoke here, we could. So now our smoke is white. So it kind of like they glom together in the when the particles overlap, they kind of become a single particle in the way that they look, right? So this is also how you get clouds and things like that. What else do we have? We have alpha blended. This is not the right material. There we go. We have alpha blended. We have alpha blended soft, which looks like this, and then we have a soft particles factor, which we can mess with. I believe what this is going to do is it's going to make it so that the way that the particles interact with each other is going to be different. It's going to make it look like they're soft, floatier particles, for what that's worth. Typically speaking, you won't notice a difference between them, between particles additive and additive soft. You won't really, in most situations you won't. In very specific situations, you'll maybe want to use the soft variant, but I believe additive is cheaper, so you should probably want to use that most of the time anyway. Just a point of advice. But if you notice, like, if I go back and forth between additive and additive soft, additive soft makes this look softer because it's handling the alpha differently, right? And plus I don't have a tint on that, which kind of sucks. Alpha blended is going to take the oh, no. Give me this. There we go. So this is what alpha blended looks like. It's taking the alpha and I believe it's leaving everything else out of it. It's hard to tell. So if I choose my other party, black. I believe it takes the alpha and blends it with the base texture and gives you a tint function. I believe that's all this does. I'm not entirely sure on what a lot of these do because I don't use most of them. Yeah, okay, so see, like, this is what this would look like if we were using alpha blended. It's taking the alpha channel and it's blending it together with the tinting in a very strange way. This can be really useful. Like, this actually looks like the like rescue smoke. I don't know if you guys have ever seen rescue smoke, but this is kind of what it looks like. It's kind of like a chalky substance, but yeah, this is a white texture with a red tint to it, and this is kind of what it looks like. It's like a darker. It kind of blends it in a darker way, but it does still add it together, kind of. So they do kind of glom in a nice way. Alpha blended pre-multiply will do some weird stuff. Oh, not Patty. Party. There we go. Boom. So this will. It's kind of like the additive soft, but for darks, and kind of the way that it makes things mesh together, or the additive soft for darks. So it's pre-multiplying. I'm trying to think of an easy way to describe what like pre-multiply does. I believe it's taking the alpha and multiplying the texture against it, and then outputting that. I believe that's what's happening. So it's using the alpha in, again, a different way. So yeah. Which, by the way, I should probably mention, if you're going to be doing effects work and stuff, I suggest you just play around with these and like play with each one a little bit and kind of see what gives you the style you're going for. I can suggest things all day, but if I don't know, if you're not getting the look you want to go for, try a different shader, and like just see if that helps out a little bit, because I kind of like the way that alpha blended with a white particle texture looks for smoke, right? Like, not if it's tinted red, but like this looks awesome for smoke because it starts off black. Of course, it's not working correctly, and I don't know why. Simulate, please. Yeah, there we go. So like it starts off one color and then it goes to gray, which this would be a really, really great smoke texture for, or a great smoke effect for something other than what we're going for, right? Like not candle smoke. Yeah. But anyway, so like feel free to experiment with things, because that's how you learn, and that's how you get better. Yeah. Anyway. Multiply is going to do the same thing as add, but for darks, and it's going to do that's what I was using for my smoke, because what it does is it takes the darks and kind of gloms them together with the other darks, and you notice it has a soft particles factor as well. Yeah, and then the particles multiply double does the same thing, but I believe it just does it twice. I think it like doubles down on the amount of multiplying. I think that's what that means. I'm probably really wrong on some of this stuff. Like I said, I don't know the in-depth way that all these shaders work. I just kind of play around with them until I get the look that I want. Vertex Lit Blend has an emissive color. It will. This is if you want your particles to look like they are lit from themselves. So you it's tough to explain a lot of this stuff, but basically the idea is this looks like it's emitting light now, and if I shined a light on it, it would emit light based off of the settings in the shader, right? So like if you wanted like glowy so yeah, like this is what this texture looks like without any of the emissive stuff in it, and then suddenly I can add emissive to it to make it look like it's glowing a little bit of a certain color. And more importantly, I can use scripts and or animations to govern the amount that it glows. So we could have like you could have a fog that's like pulsing a little bit, and that could be kind of interesting. Yeah, that's all this does. And the emissive channel is emissive means unlit, basically. So if you have lighting in your scene and you're kind of in like a dark graveyard and you want like the fog to pulse like that, all right, somebody's ramping up the freeway. All right, so if you have you want that fog to pulse a little bit, you just the pulsing will be unaffected by the light if you use the emissive color. That's what I was trying to get at. So this emissive color is going to look like it's glowing. And next we have additive multiply, and I'm going to switch back to my other one, my black party, and the tint color is going to be, this looks awful. So, I think, yeah, I don't have a good example of how to use this one. But the gist is it's going to be, what is it? Additive multiply. So it's going to take the, bright parts and it's going to accentuate those, but like it's using the alpha for all of this. Effectively what it's doing here is it's showing my alpha channel. And probably why that is it's taking the alpha channel and multiplying that against the white parts of the texture, which is none. So it's turning out to be just the alpha channel. I very, very rarely ever use this one. And yeah. For what I want to do, by the way, now that I've kind of gone over all of these, is I want to use a multiply for the smoke, because it kind of gloms together the darks together. It kind of gloms the darks together, and it will end up giving me the kind of smoke that I want to go for. And because I have some grays that I'm using in the color over lifetime right here, so I go from black to gray, it will that will help fade it out, because whenever you use a multiply filter, even in Photoshop, it ignores all the brights, right? It takes any white and cuts that out and only uses the black. So the more white something is, the more it doesn't exist. And this fading from black to gray means that it's actually kind of fading out, even like independent of the alpha, right? So like the alpha could be here, but it's still going to fade out a little bit if I change this to white, because it's going to maybe not, maybe it won't do that, maybe I'm crazy. It's possible that I'm crazy and I just don't know what I'm talking about for this particular section. But typically if you're using a multiply shader and you go from black to white, it will ignore the white part. Yeah. I want to undo that, and I don't know if it will let me undo that. I don't think it's letting me undo that. That sucks. Oh, no, it did. Okay, cool. So, yeah, we have our base smoke here, and that's kind of how I approached smoke and the different shaders and why I chose the shader that I chose. Hopefully that makes some sort of sense, and if it doesn't, let me know. And if I was wrong about anything in this particles list, which I probably was probably wrong about some of it, let me know. But basically the gist is, if it's additive, that means it's going to use brights more. If it's multiply, then it's going to use the darks more. And if it's additive multiply, then it's going to use some combination of the two to get you an interesting look. And alpha blended is mostly going to focus on the alpha channel, which I'll talk about alpha channels and stuff in a second, because I don't think I ever have. But yeah, actually, well, I can do that right now. So the texture that I'm using for this looks like this. It is a black square, and as a matter of fact, I have it in Photoshop open. I'm going to ignore this for now. You didn't see that. Alright, so this is what the texture that I'm using looks like. It is, I believe, a... Whoa, no. Yeah, it is a 512 by 512 texture. And it's all black. The reason why I'm using this texture is because I have an alpha channel. This alpha channel governs the transparency in most cases, but the alpha channel in Unity is used for a bunch of different things depending on the shader you're using. So for particle effects, it's usually using this as the transparency mask, white being 100% opaque, yeah, and then black being 100% transparent. So in other words, if it is white, it exists. If it's black, it doesn't in that particular spot. So right here, the particle is going to be opaque. It's going to be there. It's going to be visible. Over here, it's going to be not visible. And that's what's giving me this this look here. Like, you can kind of see that alpha channel right here, even though it's all rotated and messed up and like blending with other channels and things like that. They're blending with other particles rather. So you can kind of start to see how that alpha channel is bleeding through and into my particle. Yeah, the way you create an alpha channel, I'm going to copy that guy, and I'm going to then delete it. If you want to make an alpha channel, just go over here to your channels and hit new down here, or just right click. There is a way to make a new alpha channel that I'm not thinking of, but there's always the new layer. That's going to immediately create an alpha for you, and then you can just like paint in here, and that'll give you your alpha channel. It's always going to be black and white, so if you try to use a color, it's not going to let you use a color. It's just going to default to using whatever the gray value of that color is. Yeah, so I'm going to use this, which is something that I generated using like render clouds and a circle gradient and stuff. So you don't have to know what any of that means, but basically I created this alpha using a couple really quick techniques. Yeah, and then I filled this black, so because I know I want the whole texture to be black, and I want the alpha to govern what it is, what the shape of it is. And I also have a white variant. That's what I was switching back and forth between. It's the exact same thing, except it's white instead of black. So that'll usually get me what I want out of most texture or most particle situations, is a white and a black variant of my texture, and then I can color it using the particle system. Yeah, mostly because I'm using one for additive and one for multiplied textures. And then I have different texture variants and stuff as well. So getting back into this, that was the smoke. And I'm sure you guys are all really curious about how I did the fire if you're new to textures and things, or new to particles and things. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to look at just the flame. So this flame is pretty easy to make happen, surprisingly. It's, as far as the texture, or the God, I keep doing that. As far as the particle is set up, it's just a 1 second looping particle effect, which you can make it 2 seconds if you want, but that'll make it do this because the lifetime of the particles is only 1. But if you make it last longer, it'll be a little bit more choppy because it's an animation, so it is using frames. If we make this the lifetime of this guy 0.5, and we make this 0.5, it'll be really, really fast. It'll be really flickery and fast, which is maybe what we want. I don't know. It's totally up to your discretion on how you want the thing to function. If we pre-warm it, then this is what it looks like, because yeah, it does different things. So how did I yeah, sorry, I'm just gonna. So what we want for this particle effect is we want it to spawn a single particle over the lifetime of the thing. So I have a single particle burst. I have the shape is a sphere with a very, very, very tiny radius because there isn't a point, which is kind of crappy, I think. You could do a hemisphere if you wanted to, or a cone, and just make everything super tiny, but you also can't put a radius of 0 in this. And I did want a little bit of jitter in the thing. Maybe that's a bad idea, maybe I don't. It's just kind of it's totally up to your own discretion on how you want this thing to look. I don't have any movement in it. I just have a lifetime and a size, and the size is totally governing how big the flame is. So if you want it bigger, you can have it bigger. I would not suggest doing a random between two constants, because then you end up with this happening, which looks kind of crappy, in my opinion. So I would keep it to a constant if you're going to do something like this. You probably don't want any rotation either, because if you have rotation, then you'll end up with flames sticking out of like weird sides. And this is the same thing if like you have a random thing. You can color the flames, so if you want like blue fire, you can totally have blue fire. That is something that you can do. But the start color for me is going to be white, because it's gathering all of its color information from the texture itself. So I don't need to add any color to it. In this case, it's going to be local. You could do world, but that would be kind of bad, because then you would like leave behind like a trail of these, which would look kind of crappy, I think. So I'm going with local, which means that no matter where I move it, it'll just be there. So I have a little ball of light and fire. Yeah, and then the important thing, the thing that is making this whole thing function, is the texture sheet animation. So what I'm saying here is that I have 4 tiles by 4 tiles, so I have 16 frames. 4 times 4 is 16. I have animation over the entire sheet. It's not just a single row, and we'll talk. This will make a lot more sense in a second once I show you guys the texture. And we have our frame over time, which looks like this. So we're just doing a linear frame progression. If I did this, then you would see like a little bit of a choppy start, and then it would get faster. But I don't want that. I want this. Or like, for example, I could do this, and then it would go backwards. I would have backwards going flame that looks or a backwards animated flame that looks choppy. If I wanted to, I could do something like, I could add a point. I could do this, and then I could do this, and it would go back and forth over the course of its lifetime, and then I could increase its lifetime to like say 2, and do 2, and then we would have a flame that does this, where it like goes forward and then backward. Yeah. And I think I could probably do broken, and we could even do something like that, and it could look a little bit more natural, but it would be tough for me to like. It'd be a tough sell, is what I'm getting at. But you can get away with like looping stuff this way if you really want to, where you like break it and then go back and forth. And it could look weird enough that people don't notice that it's looping. It could just look bizarro, and that's kind of what's happening. Is that like you look at this and you're like, that's really weird looking. That's a really weird looking flame. Or you can just do a linear progression and hope that you make the thing loop enough, which is what I'm going to do. So this is what it looks like. Yeah, so that's our texture sheet animation, frame over time. This is like the number of frames, and this is the lifetime of the thing. So at this particular point in time, it is on that frame. This particular point in time, which is down here, it's on that frame of animation. And there's 16 frames again. So cycles, I could do 2, and then it's going to go through 2 full cycles of the animation before it dies out. I could also do 0.5. Oh, no, I can't. I can only do 1 or 2. And, oh, yeah, interesting. You can do a random between 2 constants. So frame over time, or random between 2 curves, rather, would probably be better. So then you could do like I want 1 to do that, and the other to do that. So now we'll end up with like, maybe it'll be super choppy and maybe it won't be. So maybe that's not the best thing in the world to use, but it's a thing you could do. Yeah, anyway. And then for the renderer, I just have a custom material hooked up, and this is where we're going to show you the texture, which looks like this. So this is the flame texture, and it'll be easier to see if I do this, and it'll be even easier to see if I change my crappy grid settings. So let me change these guys to be like that, and be what? I'm just gonna go with that. There we go. Okay, this is much better. So each one of these is a different frame of animation, and by the way that I created this texture, because I did create this texture, sort of. In Maya, there is a fluid effects animations. There's a fluid effects fire, like there's a presets and stuff that you can just have, and or that you can just like you click a couple buttons and suddenly you have fire in Maya. And I just used that for the time being for this demonstration because it was really, really easy and it looks pretty good as fire goes. So that's kind of how I made this. If you're familiar with Maya at all, then I would look up how to do fluid fire using the visor, I believe is what I used to start off with, and then I tweaked some values here and there. But yeah, this is totally not, this is like a low skill thing to be able to do. So yeah. So I rendered out a series of frames, and then I deleted a bunch of the in-between frames because I needed to be able to fit it in. This particular example, I'm doing a 16 frame thing. You could do more. You could make it 5 by 5 and make it 25 frames. You could make it however many frames you want to make it. It's totally up to you. I chose 16 just because it was going to be quick and easy, and it's going to be efficient. And you can also hand paint your fire if you want and just do like a sequential animation of flames. And it would actually probably be easier to do it that way and make it loop, because what I had to do, you'll see all these weird groups over here. And if you're not familiar with Photoshop at all, I'm sorry ahead of time, but this is Photoshop. You'll see all these weird groups that I have right here. You notice that it's the first couple frames. It's because I'm trying to loop these back frames onto these front frames and get it to look right. So you'll see like over here I have like a transparent fire. That's because that's me overlaying parts of the, or that's me taking this exact frame, putting it over here, changing it a little bit, and then overlaying the first frame on top of it. Yeah, see? And then trying to slowly fade up that background so that it'll loop. And then I kind of just start doing that there. And I'm kind of doing some alpha masking and stuff as well to like get it to work right. I don't know. It worked well enough for this example, I think. That's kind of why you see like the choppiness in the animation, is because I'm only using 16 frames and I'm not looping it the way that I would like. But anyway, so picture each one of these 2x2 squares. So this guy right here and this guy right here and this one here. These are the frames of each animation, and it just kind of, it starts here and it goes down this way and it ends, and then it starts over. So when I say this guy animates the whole sheet and it does a full cycle. If it does 2 cycles, then it's going through that entire process twice. If I say decrease or increase the lifetime of the thing, so if I say that the duration of this is 0.5, because all of this is duration based, right? So this is going to be 2 cycles over the duration of a of the particle system. If I say that this is actually 0.25, it'll only do half the animation and then it'll stop out. And if I say I want another one to appear, 1 at we'll say 0.25, I'll get this, where I get a really, really, really quickly animating thing. I can do 1 cycle. I'm only getting half the animation out of this now. It's just looping the first half of the animation over and over and over again. So, yeah. I want 1 cycle. I want this thing to be 0.5. And so we end up with this, which is a full cycle of animation, I believe, right? Yeah, I think so. If we do 1 and 1, so we'll see that this is the full cycle, and you'll see that exactly what I was talking about with me introducing. You'll see this little flicker of this little guy right here. That's me introducing the first frame and trying to make it loop properly, and it doesn't loop properly. So, yeah, anyway. So that's kind of the texture and what all that means. The tiles here, you can set, so 4x4. You can also set this to 2x2, and then I'll get this. So now what it's looking at is these 4 are a single frame, and then these 4 are a single frame, and these 4 are a single frame, because I'm telling it to divide the whole thing in 2. So divide it in 2, divide it in 2. We can also get away with, if this is 1, then suddenly we have 6, and it looks real bad. But yeah, so that's kind of how you do sheet animation on particles. The material is just going to be, I have this set to additive soft. We could probably set it to something else like additive if we really wanted to, and that'll give it this blown out look. Could look better, could look worse. It's totally up to whatever whatever your discretion is, right? Like, I don't want to be the guy to say this is how it's done, because I don't know how it's done. Most of the time I figure it out as I go. You can also alpha blend it a little bit more or less depending on how you're feeling about stuff. This would actually be probably a good time to use the vertex lip blend and making this like emit a color based off of the... Oh, maybe not. It is a bad idea. It is a bad idea. Wow, this looks like crap. Anyway, maybe that's a bad idea. So yeah, I'm just using additive for what I want, and then I'm going to maybe blow it out a little bit, but not a whole lot. So like that. And that works great for me. Yeah, so now my flame is going to look like this. And it looks like it's lighting. And the other thing that I did, I think, was in here. Aha, see, cast shadows is on. I don't want that to be true. And I don't want it to receive shadows, wherever that is. Receive shadows. Because it's fire. Fire doesn't cast or receive shadows. That's silly. So, yeah, that'll help me blend this and sell this as fire, right? All right, the next thing I have in here is a point light. And you'll notice that I have the point light hanging out just above the spot where the particle exists, or rather the flame exists here, and the point light exists a little bit above it is what I want. It's like that. So I want it to exist like 0.5 above on the z-axis, because this thing is all rotated all wonky to make it work right. And the reason why that's the case is because if this is actually at 0, and I see this mistake a lot in games, this fire right here would be lighting this side of the cube. Like, that's just the case. And it would be lighting this side of the cube as well, more than just this side of the cube. Like, now suddenly this fire down here looks really weird, because it's not... Light comes from the entire plume of fire, not just the base of it. So we should try and simulate as if light is coming from this entire plume. And I do that by increasing the position of this 0.5 up. And now when you look at this, it's the settings of this are really, really crappy. So I might move this forward some and down some, like so. Yeah, there we go. So now when we come in here, we can kind of see this a little more smoothly. It looks like light is coming down onto the cube from a higher perspective. So lighting is in and of itself an art form. Please? Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, I was making it bigger and larger and it wasn't doing it for me. So, yeah, lighting is in and of itself its own art form, and knowing how it can work in effects is really, really powerful. So it can really help sell your effects. Because right now, without this point light, this is what my fire would look like, and it looks really, really bad, because this doesn't sell as fire. This sells as a really crappy particle effect. But with this light in here, it kind of blends out the bottom of the texture into the cube and makes it seem like it's there. It's actually lighting up that space, and it actually is like if I move it, it'll look like that ball of fire is actually doing what it should be doing as fire. That's really powerful, I think. Yeah. So this is what our finished particle effect looks like, right? With the lighting and the smoke and the fire and all that stuff, it looks like this. And this is a really, really good example of why I might want to use texture sorting, the fudging that I was talking about at the end of the last video, because my smoke is rendering on top of my fire, and maybe that doesn't look the best, right? Maybe I want the smoke to sort fudge a little bit, a little bit behind my fire. So now I'm going to keep moving it back. I'm going to move my flame sorting fudge forward. Why isn't this working? Oh, because it's moving it forward on the z-axis, and that's not... Anyway, this would be a good example of using sorting fudge to your advantage to make the fire render on top of the... by distance. And then we're going to say -1. -5. 5? No? Okay, I don't know why this isn't working. This should be working, and it's not, which is crappy. So anyway, this would be a good example of a place where sorting fudge, presuming it would work, that you could like push the fire to render always in front of the smoke, and then you could like you make it look like the smoke is coming out from the end of the fire instead of like, because I can see the smoke rendering on top of some of the stuff here and it looks kind of hokey and bad, but yeah. So that's how that would work if it was working, and I don't know why it's not working right now. Sorry about that. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is you may notice that that point light that we just set up is flickering. And there isn't a way to do that in default in Unity, but you'll notice that if I have the light selected, it's actually like freaking out. It's like pulsing a little bit, and like all these numbers are going haywire over here. That's because I've attached this light flicker script to it. And I'd like to take a minute to go over the light flicker script. So I'm gonna be going into code now to talk about how I hooked that up. But that is basically everything to know about this particle system that I have set up here with the flaming cube. If you have any questions about any of that stuff, feel free to leave it in the comments below and all that jazz. But yeah, I am going to be going to code next, so if you're not really interested in the code side of things, then awesome. If you are, stick around, and hopefully that'll be helpful to you, because I will be talking about how to manipulate the light using using code to make it flicker and pulse like a candle flicker would, right? Something very, very useful for effects artists and people trying to set a scene trying to set up a scene that has realistic fire in it. So yeah, if I'm going to lose you, then I'll see you next time, but otherwise, stick around. Cool. Now that all the lame non-code people are gone. So this is the Flickr script that I have going on. It's pretty straightforward. On the point light here, you'll see a frequency, you'll see an intensity, and a range. The frequency is how often it's going to flicker, right? So we have how quickly it'll change. So if we increase this, it will click every now and then. You'll see it in like this sphere here. If I zoom out, you'll see it every 3 seconds. It'll click to being a new one, and I can change it to 1, and you'll see it every 1 second. It'll click over to being the next thing, which is why I have it set to 0.05. So basically, every 0.05 of a second, it will change to be something different. And I found that works pretty well, because if it's 0.01, it's almost too fast. It looks super weird and unrealistic. It looks kind of uncanny, right? Like, that's not how that should look. Even if it's set to like 0.1, you could sell that probably, but I didn't like it. I wanted it to be a little faster, so I have it set to 0.05, which I felt looked decent enough to warrant a candle flame. The other thing that we have here is our intensity. So if I change this to -0.5 and 5, it's gonna take the intensity and really, really crank it to like one way or the other. Because the intensity here is set to 5, it's literally changing it from 0 to 10. Yeah, that's not something that we probably want to do. So I left it a little subtle, and it'll go from 4 to 6. And it looks pretty okay. If we wanted to change this even less, we could do -0.5 and 0.5, and it would still look pretty okay. Like for a candle flame, that looks like a decent flicker, right? The additive range is going to be what causes this thing to pulse. So if I have this set to 0 and 0, it's not going to pulse anymore. If I have this set to -1 and 1, it'll pulse a lot. And the reason why this is useful is because if I do one of these and create like a platform for it to cast light onto, it'll do that, which looks like what fire would do. -0.5 and 0.5 will make it do it less. but it flickers like you'd expect fire to flicker, right? Like it increases and decreases the range, because typically speaking in the realistic, like in the real world, the intensity of a light also governs how far it goes. In the digital world, that's not necessarily the case. You'll have a low light that will travel very far. And that's for ambient reasons, right? That's for, like, I want my flashlight to go for a really, really, really far distance and be really dim. That's the thing you can do in games, but typically in the real world, you'll just make the light brighter and it'll go farther. Like, that's how light decay works. So in this, we have to kind of simulate that, and that's kind of how I'm doing that is when they're not directly tied to each other though. So I could do that in code if I wanted to. I could directly tie the range to the intensity and say that if you are dimmer, you get pulled in. But I didn't want that because I wanted it to be, sometimes it'll be more condensed and it'll be brighter, and sometimes it'll be less, mostly so that there isn't like a linked pattern there. It looks random, which is good because it is random. It's true random. So anyway, talking about how I did this, it's pretty straightforward. So again, we have our frequency, we have our intensity, our additive intensity, and our additive range. I need to pull the light object, the component that is on the thing, the object that I'm using, which is this guy, this light here. And I need a timer to govern the frequency. I need to know what my base intensity and my original base range is, because I don't want this to crawl. I don't want it to I want to avoid the situation where I increase the intensity that much and then I increase the intensity again and again and again and again, and it keeps getting brighter and brighter and brighter. That's not what I want. I want it to constantly reference what it originally was and offset it a little bit one way or the other. And I want it to constantly do that every time it changes. So I want it to I don't want my light to constantly get brighter. I want it to kind of stay around the same brightness as I set it originally. That way, if I set up a scene and I have it looking really nice, I can keep it looking about that same for most of the time. Whoa. So anyway, that's what these guys are going to do for us. So when we start, we're going to look for the light component, and if we don't find it, we're going to disable this script, because I don't want to run the script if I don't have this attached to a light. I'm also going to output this debug message here so I know why it's not working, which is useful. But I'm going to set the this light. Oh, and I don't actually set the range. Oh, that's a problem. See, look at this. I found a bug. All right. Base range is going to equal this light dot range. There we go. So we're going to get the light component. We're going to set it to be referenced in this script. And then we're going to pull down the intensity and range that we start with right off the bat. That way we have these stored here, and we're never going to mess with these. We can if we want. Well, I have some functions down here to do that if we need to. And there's a reason why that's the case, but I'm not going to go into that quite yet. But we have the option to do it. And then, so that's what we're going to do to start. And then on update, we're just going to increase our timer. And if our timer is greater than or equal to our frequency, we're going to change stuff. We're going to say, hey, make this intensity the base intensity plus our randomization, right? So we can go negative or positive with it, and that's totally up to whatever we put in these values here. You'll see that I have a negative 2.5 and 2.5 as the base. So it'll randomly choose a value from this range, and then it'll add that to our original intensity, and then it will set that. And it does the same thing for range. And then we reset our timer. And that is everything that you need. You technically don't need any of this stuff down here. This is for me hooking it up to a different script that I have for dimming the light, so that way I can dim this over I can dim this light over time and still have it flickering. So I can have a candlelight like flicker out quickly, if that makes sense. I haven't actually tested that yet, but I believe it'll work. But I'm not going to talk about the other script yet, so it's fine. That's going to be in the next video. So yeah, that's how I got light flicker to happen. You technically don't need any of this junk, so I could, in theory, do that, and then this would be all you need to get light flicker to work. I'm not going to attach the script because this is so simple, and I just explained how to do it. I want you to do it on your own if you want it to happen. So yeah, that is everything with this video, I think. That's how I got my flaming cube all set up and ready to go. Yep, I'm going to do that. So yeah, if you wanted this animation to be smoother, you would just do more frames. If you wanted the smoke to look a little better, you would use a different texture probably and play with it some more, because I don't really like the way this looks either. You could also do more frames in the fire and then do something very similar, like render out some fluid smoke, and you could get that working the exact same way, and then you could get fluid fire and smoke from Maya directly into Unity that way. Something that I played around with. It's a little less efficient, but it could look really, really nice if you spend the time and love to get it to look as it should. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, this would work for most situations. I would probably tone down the smoke quite a lot. I would probably make this like barely existent. I'd probably do something like that. And I would probably make the texture less detailed, and I would make them bigger and less of them. So I would probably change this down to like 3, and probably make the start size like, I don't know, like 8 and 12. And that would look more like this, which to me is more like candle smoke, like old-timey candle smoke, right? But that's totally up to, like I said, it's up to whatever vision you want to go for. Scale is kind of whatever you set it to be, right? So who knows? This could be a car that's on fire, and then it'd be a different thing. But anyway, I hope you guys took something from this, and I hope this was helpful to whoever is an aspiring effects artist or whoever you are, or just as somebody who's interested in effects and doesn't know anything about it. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, or if I was wrong about something. Absolutely tell me, and I will upvote your comment. It'll be on the top. And be sure you read the comments at the top, because that could be a place where you could get more information from. Yeah, thanks for watching. In the next video, we're going to talk about some... we're going to go into this effects sequencer. I'll tease what it is a little bit. It's an effects sequencer script that I wrote that does this. Oh, that's boring. That's not the one I wanted. Well, that's not that climactic. This is the one that I wanted, I think. Yeah, this is the one. It does this nonsense. And I do a thing, and it. Oh crap. Oh, that's why. I gotta turn this guy on, and then it does this. It does. I swear, guys, it does. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna explosions. We're gonna do explosions. It's gonna be ridiculous. Yeah, here, explosions, using like default particles and the same textures that I just used in the fire. We're gonna use we're gonna create some explosions. Yep, particle effects are super cool. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys learned something, and yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.